I'm going to talk about, if we've been talking about the big picture in the farm sector so far, I'm going to be talking about the bigger picture in the farm sector, and a picture that is far from being complete, especially given the warnings that Bill Heffernan's been on about in respect of Chinese investment. The context of the interest in Chinese investment, of course, is a context of a very big shift in commodity prices, especially in the resource sector over the last 8 years or so, that's driven a huge surge in investment in that sector, not only in Australia but around the world, and shifted the terms of trade significantly in the favour of resource and primary commodities producers like ourselves, with some variability, of course, in that experience. The rise of China and the rise of India and their industrialisation and the rapid pace of it over the last decade or so is behind all that, and the trade growth, especially in raw materials and agricultural commodities associated with that, and the growth in the resource dependence of, in particularly the Chinese economy, have driven the need for a big expansion of investment in these sectors. That investment, of course, has had an impact on our economy and other similarly placed economies, and a huge impact, in fact, especially in the minerals and energy sector, but farming is now an important interest around the growing interest in food security worldwide. The scale of that demand has led to a big expansion of investment, not only by foreign investors in the mineral sector in Australia, but of course also by the well-established local and foreign investors. The new foreign investors in that sector are significantly Chinese investors, and that has been facilitated by a change in policy strategy in China over the last 5, 6 years or so, the going out strategy, which gives permission to large enterprises, especially state-owned enterprises in China, to invest abroad. The growth of China's overseas direct investment, of course, there's a huge amount of investment. Basically about $50 billion worth of foreign investment goes into China every year from all around the world, North America, Japan, Europe and so on. But the growth in Chinese overseas direct investment has been very rapid over the last 5 years or so. And that investment has taken the form of direct investment, indirect investment or portfolio investment, importantly through sovereign wealth funds, and has involved not only the minerals and resource, the energy sector, but also other sectors. And in this, of course, we've had experience in the past, the Japanese precedent, when the growth of our resource and energy and broader trade relationships with Japan led to a similar surge of investment from Japan in this country, and a learning process around that investment from Japan across the whole spectrum of opportunities for investment to deliver resources and commodities out of this country into our growing and most important markets in East Asia. The policy response, of course, to all this, especially the rapidity of the growth of interest from China, has been a little bit nervous. It's a new thing. We're dealing with an investment partner here that's somewhat different from previous investment partners. We've run a regime which is open to foreign investment for a very long time, and that's served us well in the resource sector and the primary sector more broadly, including prominently in agriculture. But there are a number of elements that have raised policy issues, and certainly in some parts of the community there's been a noise element that's been to some extent antipathetic to the rapid growth of Chinese investment in Australia. But overall, in the policy community and the business community and so on, there's been an acknowledgement of the importance of building up these investment links with China in the same way as we built up investment links with Japan and our other partners historically. If you look at the story here of the growth of investment, you'll see how it's been all concentrated in the last few years or so. And the big surge really came from 2007, 2008. This is the latest data that's available through the Foreign Investment Review Board of proposals reviewed by that board. But other data confirms this picture, and indeed recent census of foreign investment right around the world from China reveals that if you look at the period over the last 5 years, roughly speaking, there's been about $34.4 billion worth of Chinese investment in the primary sector in Australia, almost all of that, of course, in the minerals and resources sector. That has implications for the farm sector, even if there were no investment in the farm sector, and there are now beginning to be small amounts of Chinese investment in the farm sector. It has implications for the farm sector because in some areas, as you well know, Liverpool Plains is one prominent example, investment in minerals by local firms like BHP as well as by Chinese firms is competitive for land and the use of land for agricultural or mining purposes. Well, what's the role of foreign direct investment in the primary sector from China or from wherever else? In the resource sector, importantly, foreign investment has played a critical role in the integration of that sector from raw materials into final manufacture, processing and final manufacture of metal-based outputs. That's been a prominent feature of this trade and this business for decades, more than a century or so, where vertical integration in these trades is common. In the aluminium sector in particular, the sector was dominated and continues to be dominated by vertical integration, the presence of foreign investors at the raw materials end, because the chains of supply across the raw materials processing to final manufacture demands that integration for efficient and competitive production of the final product. And some kind of linkage, across even sectors that are not so closely integrated in technical terms, like the iron ore producing sector, are important when you have large-scale investment servicing large-scale manufacturing or processing activities in consumer countries in order to guarantee smooth logistics and communication and efficiency across the supply chain. So that's what has been the circumstance in the resource sector. And this foreign investment has been important to industry strength and international competitiveness. I say bluntly that the Australian sector could not have established its competitiveness in the international commodity market in the way that it has, being basically the most competitive and efficient supplier of these commodities to the international marketplace, with the exception of oil, across the whole range of minerals and energy products, without the beneficial presence of foreign investment. China's played a role in investing in Australia from a very early stage of its modern industrialisation. We had two big investments in Australia when China was really a command economy, or where the prominent industrial activities were all state-owned. That's no longer the case. But in the 1980s, we had the big Channa investment, which led to the shipments of iron ore out of Hamersley in northwest Australia to the Baoshan steel mill in Shanghai, or near Shanghai. And then we had the Portland aluminium smelter case. And these were two big investments out of China in the early days into Australia. And Australia soon established itself as the largest destination for Chinese investment in the early days of China's going abroad when it hadn't common approval as it has since the going out strategy. The drivers of Chinese FDI to seek competitiveness and the security of supply and the links across the production chain that I mentioned before. Prominent players in the Australian market that you'll all be familiar with from China on the resource sector side are Chinalco, Sinosteel, Min Metals, and so on. In the farm sector, the drivers are not so prominent yet. But my message is to this sector that this will become a more active and important part of Chinese investment abroad, including in Australia. So far, Chinese investment in agriculture is very, very modest. Globally, it's very modest. And it's not concentrated on Australia. Globally, in the last 5 years, China's invested about $3.5 billion in agriculture. Most of that's gone to Latin America, Brazil in particular, important, and to Africa. And a very, very small amount, an unmeasurably small amount, has come to Australia. The activity is now beginning to pick up. And it's motivated by the same kinds of interests as motivated the Japanese investors in the farm sector in Australia over the last couple of decades or so. Investment, I might say, which is now well established and important in the connection between the Australian market for agricultural and farm commodities and the Japanese market for these products raw and these products in their processed form. There's been an attempt around the interests in developing lines of supply around increased agricultural trade dependence in China to make links with suppliers through investment in countries like Australia and in greenfields investments such as I described have taken place in Brazil and in Africa. The targets of interest in agribusiness, in livestock, dairy and sugar, but there's been no significant large-scale investment in any of these sectors in Australia yet. They're all relatively small-scale investments. The farm sector, of course, gains from this investment, from the addition to the capital stock of the farm sector that foreign investment brings, from know-how and technology. That's less important in the case of investment early from Japan or early from China than the gains that come through the establishment of market links in the destination market for product from the Australian farm sector around the investment projects. Those links, I might add, are two-way. Already, many of the project proposals that are coming on stream through Chinese interest in the Australian market are going to involve a partnership in Australia and partnership through investment in China itself, in the delivery of the product in China itself. So there'll be investment in many of these cases both ways, into Australia, but also reciprocal links into the Chinese market. And these links are important in establishing new lines of business and new export markets as the demand for imported product grows very rapidly, as it will over the next 20 years in China.